All right. Well, people that I'm sure have kissed people upside down at times or another. Guster, Matt, run the numbers for me. I have a story for you about Guster
Oh,
before we
Oh,
go into the
wow.
bio.
I can't wait to hear it. So this is Guster's Lost and Gone Forever. It comes in at number 3,157 in the 1990s on Best Ever Albums, number 333 in 1999, number 19,807 of all time. It's Guster's third highest rated album behind 2003's Keep It Together and 2006's Ganging Up on the Sun. Lost and Gone Forever did not make Rolling Stone's list, and Guster's ranked number 3,330 of overall artist rankings on Best Ever Albums.
So before I get into the bio and I talk about, you guys talk about your take and I talk about mine, I will say that this band always is interesting for me because when I was in college, I went to college in the Midwest and I was actually a journalism major. And in one of my earliest classes, there were two students, a boy and a girl, who it was like watching a movie, guys. I was friendly with both of them. They both loved Guster and met each other in the journalism classes, and they'd wear the Guster shirts. And I saw the boy show interest in the girl, and then over time the girl showed interest, and they went to Guster shows, and I would hear them talk about it, and from afar, like I would watch them like clearly, right? Like get more and more. Yeah, more and more get into each other. I'm watching stuff like, oh, this is building towards something right here. And and just over time, right? Like they became a couple, and then over time they went to this stuff, and they both became writers. I will keep the names out of it. Not that they're ever gonna fucking listen to this, but just and they became writers. And like from afar, like I just remember reading one time, and I saw that the female had the last name of the guy that I knew.
Oh, so they got married.
They
Okay.
got married, and I haven't, I don't cyber stalk anyone, so I haven't followed up. I hope they're still doing well, but like I could truly say, right, that this
Wow.
band because they're a band with a cult following, as we'll talk about.
are, yeah.
It's one of those. I watched this band like largely be the connective tissue of a from the beginning to the end type of love story. So even though I'm a cold man, guys, even my heart was warmed by watching that. It was like something out of like one of those movies, like Boys and Girls, right? This terrible movie I watched with like Claire Forlani and Chris Klein, right? It was a similar type thing, like tracking a relationship over time. So I just thought I'd share that because it's one of the first things I remember with this band. All right, so Matt ran the numbers. I was laughing because I've never done a bio, like looked up. I know what Guster sounds like. I know they have a cult following. I knew people who loved this band, including those two people, like loved, right? Like my favorite band is like, I go 10 concerts a year, that type of band. I had never looked up their bio though. Their bio made me chuckle, guys, because it felt like something if you said, John, write up a bio without knowing it, like that would be funny about like this band. And here we go, guys. Guster, an American alternative rock band from the great state of Massachusetts, Somerville, Massachusetts. The founding members are Adam Gardner, Ryan Miller, and Brian Rosenwerkel. They met at a freshman wilderness orientation program of their college at Tufts University. So already, right? Like
Yep.
you knew this already, Matt.
I knew they were from Tufts, and I think my brother went to Holy Cross in Worcester, and I think he saw them in in like a cafeteria or something like that. So yeah, I know that they have their roots in Massachusetts. Yeah.
Yes, they would play at the Midnight Cafe Coffee House in the Lewis Hall dormitory on a regular basis, and they would practice and play together. So they basically, at freshman orientation, they basically decided that they were going to play together. It was there, and they hung together and were a band. So is that kind of like us, guys, that we met at like an initial social?
This podcast is our Guster.
Is our Guster moment, like we met at like a social, right, for our program, and instead of starting a band, we did not start a podcast at the time. We just waited like 15 years after we knew each other to do that. So
And for a global pandemic to inspire us to get up to do something.
Yeah, so we should have started earlier with our things, but in fairness, I was listening to that. I was like, well, that's one thing we share in common with Guster. At like the equivalent of an orientation, we met each other. So the band was underground, right, playing locally in Massachusetts for their first 3 years. They were called Gus at that time, And they finally decided to, they're gigging left and right, and so their stories, but pretty much that's what it is. And they recorded their first album independently called Parachute. And that band, the band became very popular through word of mouth. In particular, it became popular as what I would kind of call an adjacent band. So lots of bands with strong followings, known for strong followings, would either there would be an overlap of the fans of those bands and Guster, and most notably bands like Dave Matthews Band, Fish, the Disco Biscuits, Mo, Widespread Panic, right? 5 bands that were cited, right, as bands that would be in the same circles, and then people that dug those bands would also dig this band. And then you throw in that it also drew in some indie, like Coffee House Scenester type folks, and then a fervent local scene, right, in New England. And the beginning of early internet, although that was not in 91 through 94, not a part of it, but certainly in even the mid to late 90s, they were one of the first very online bands. Very is maybe not the right word, but they were aware of the internet early. Let's put it that way. So while they recorded their independent album, they were still all in college, and they got sued by another artist that was named Gus. So they decided to rename themselves Guster. And shortly after that, because of the word of mouth and some demos that got there, they got to record companies. They signed a major record deal. Even with that major record deal, they released their second album, Goldfly, in 1996 independently. It wasn't until 1998, when Sire Records officially had them on board, that they re-released Goldfly as a major label debut with the publicity. And that kind of exposed them to a bigger audience in terms of availability of their albums, but B, also gave them way more ability to tour extensively, right? Like a budget, an A&R budget, stuff like that. They begin to get booked on shows like Late Show with David Letterman. And what this ends up becoming is they re-release Lost and Gone Forever, which is the album pretty much that takes us to right now, right? The album we're covering tonight. That one also led to what I thought is one of the most interesting mixes of band and show, because one of their first big gigs after this album came out was they played at Woodstock 99, which not the greatest gig, but they must have played before the fires broke out that night.
I think they did. I've seen videos of that, and there were no fires. So it was a day show, and they probably played early in the weekend.
Odd mix of energies there, right? Like Guster and their fan base with what Woodstock 99 became, but it was one of their big shows. They played at the probably more appropriate Stardust Picnic Festival in Toronto as well in 1999. Before we move on to the take, though, I should mention that this band has a very, very big and very passionate following of artists, of fans, I should say, as an artist. They tour all the time, even to this day, much like a band like Fish, right? They have concert staples and songs that aren't albums, but that are staples that the band considers almost to be singles. They do tons of covers in their own spin, largely with hand percussion, which I'm sure that we'll talk about. They've covered everything from the Cheers theme song to Under the Bridge, Total Eclipse of the Heart, Firework by Katy Perry, and many, many others. There is much like a Fish, right? They have gimmicks that coincide with songs they do at their concerts. So, for example, there's a song called the Airport Song where everybody throws ping pong balls at the stage, which is a reference to the fact that a table tennis game can be heard in the background of the studio recording. So there's that, like the fans.
Horror type of
it's like that Grateful Dead, like
Jimmy Buffett
Fish thing, Jimmy Buffett, where like you're kind of in on all the language, right? And it's like entering a something that like is very interesting how it's evolved, like the concept of a subculture, right? Because now our subcultures exist on the internet, but this is sort of a throwback to like subcultures that existed when you had to find them, right? Like, and become aware of them, and there was like a passion to it and an ownership, I think, in it. So they're also known for interjecting humor into both their live shows and their albums as well. They do interesting stuff with their music too. They like integrate The Price is Right into music. They when they sell their albums to different things, they sell their songs and albums to kind of, stuff that not only makes them money, but that's funny. Like the Weather Channel, right, was a place they sold their stuff to. But then they also had the OC. They were in Disturbia, like all these different places, right? So they kind of they kind of have a presence in terms of found music to this day. And they also are one of those bands, much like many of the bands we talked about, that has like a taping policy where they basically just don't care if you tape their live shows, because a lot of their fan base has been word of mouth, right? So in many ways, it's against the spirit of what made them. And they release many of their live shows on iTunes as things that you can access. So that's a little bit personal anecdote for Guster, and also a little bit about the band. It sounds like Matt is at least somewhat familiar with this band, so I'll start with Josh in order to get his take.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with this band at all. I seem to remember like them kind of being name checked in college, or references to them. The name sounded familiar, but I've never listened to them, or at least knowingly listened to them. And I like this album. I can see why they would have a following based on listening to this album. There's a like kind of broad appeal in some ways to this album. It's very like kind of approachable and friendly sounding type of music. It's got a little Beach Boys, it's got a little jangle to it. It's kind of generally pretty upbeat and like, I don't know, friendly. There's a lot of harmonizing in it, and there's like I feel like a whole lot of different instruments and percussion going on in this. They're very kind of I don't know, whimsical in some ways, like with the way that they construct songs and the sound of the music. Whimsical may not be the best word, but there is kind of like a lightness to the sound that I found appealing. It's good production on this album. And I found that they, at least on this album, I found the songs pretty catchy. A lot of them, I think they can craft pretty good melody on a lot of the songs. And I found myself, the more I listened to it, like kind of singing along to some of the songs. Highlights would be like Barrel of a Gun, Fa Fa, All the Way Up to Heaven. And yeah, those are kind of the three big ones for me off this album. There is, like I said, like John alluded to, I think there is like bongos or some sort of like hand drumming that definitely sounds different.
There's many different hand drum type stuff. Like, not what I'm saying is there's not just bongos. There's all the things you could play hand drum. Yes, they play.
I feel like so that kind of stands out too when you don't hear it too often. You're so used to normal drums or like electronic drums or a drum machine or something that is a noticeable difference. That comes up a lot. There's like flutes on some song. There's chimes. There's a theremin. There's all sorts of things. It feels like every song is kind of constructed a little bit differently, and it keeps you on your toes. And I found myself, responding to it. I could see the argument. Maybe it's like a little too like cutesy, or maybe more like in the Ben Folds vein of song, like singer songwriter. But I feel like these guys are pretty good together. I feel like they sound good together. I like kind of the different voices that the singers have. They kind of play off, complement each other, and I like the harmonizing. And I feel like it's kind of, at the end of the day, it's like pretty solid, like pop rock type of, not adult contemporary, but just kind of like a softer rock that's really pleasant. And I enjoyed the album. I'm interested if we talk about them again to like see if they kind of evolve. I don't think I would be one of those people that becomes like like a diehard fan or something, but I found this album pretty enjoyable this week, so it's a thumbs up.
Yeah, I'm pretty familiar with Guster. I remember hearing my freshman year in college, a friend of mine had their debut album, and there's some excellent songs on that. So I was immediately kind of struck by their gift for melody. The harmonies are great. I think, Adam Gardner and Ryan Miller just sound great together. They do an excellent job of harmonizing throughout many of their songs. And so I've always liked that. And I remember at the time, it's like, oh, their drummer just plays bongos. He doesn't have he doesn't use drumsticks. Even the cymbals, he's crashing the cymbals with his hands.
Oh, wow.
And when you would see him perform, he had his, it was like a prize fighter. He had his hands all taped up and stuff because he bangs the hell out of these things, right? And I'm like, how does he not get cuts and blisters
right.
and whatnot? But that's how they do. And so I had a friend who was like in their fan club and stuff, and so so I was like,
Kesha, a true story.
Oh, was she?
An early fan who corresponded with them via email. Yep.
So this is like one of the quintessential bands that I can think of like what kids were into at the college that I went to, which is a different college experience clearly than John.
Yes,
but this was like a huge band, and they came to play. I remember they played outside our campus center, and so I saw them on the lawn for free, and they were making fun of the name of the campus center, which was Barone, but they pronounced it Baroni. And then they started doing like a rap, like he just did like an on the spot kind of improv rap on Baroni Campus Center, and people were, it was funny, and so they do have very much like a
I went to liberal arts college energy.
very much so, but So my friend that was in the fan club got me. I'm like, give me their first two albums. So I got them through the fan club through her, and so I've always liked them. I've seen them a couple of times, and but this album, I think you can clearly hear. I think the step up in the production. They actually get Steve Lillywhite to produce it, so kind of a pretty well known producer, and so this is kind of this album of the ones that I know their first four. I kind of stopped listening after the fourth album. And I do think that they added a fourth member at some point, and I think that the drummer did branch out to start actually, playing more than just with his hands. So I can't imagine their sound changed that much, but
right.
they do switch it up a little bit. Yeah, so I do think that the production stepped up here. It was produced by Steve Lillywhite, and so you can tell that they've got this is the product of working with a major label, and I just think they do a really good job of they've got some really more upbeat songs like "What You Wish For," "Barrel of a Gun." Fa Fa, like the first four songs are excellent, I think. And the ballads, like Either Way, So Long is a song that I've always really liked. I think that's just such a simple melody, but it's so beautiful and really pleasant. And then you've got Rainy Day is kind of an interesting way to end it. That's more of an ominous sounding song that they have. So they kind of, even though they're kind of, it's two guitars and and bongos for the most part, right? But throwing in some horns, like Fa Fa, they get a saxophone guy to come in, a player to come in and also play the flute. And I just think it's a solid album. That as soon as I heard it, I was like, I really like this. And then when I listened to it this week after many years, I'm like, I still really like this. It's clearly not, they're not, changing a whole lot. It is a unique thing to have just the percussion be solely bongos. Sherry was like, this is like a little too world music-y, and I'm like, I see that, but I don't know. I've always kind of been drawn to this. So I do like them. They are fun to see live, and it's actually interesting you mentioned the whole thing about the internet, John, because I did. As I was just getting my screens up for tonight and everything like that, I did see that there was a 7-minute YouTube video of the making of this album, so it's a very quick thing. But one of the things they discussed on there was they had their fans on the internet, something like they asked them they're like, Guster's thinking of a number between 1 and 100, and the first 5 fans that guess the right number will get to be part of the next recording of our new album. And so if you look at Josh, if you got Wikipedia up there, all the whistling on All the Way Up to Heaven was done by the fans that won that contest. So they brought them into their recording, this barn in upstate New York or whatever, and had them come in to do the whistling for that.
Interesting.
So I thought that was kind of funny. So yeah, I think there is this band definitely has some sentimental value to me, for a number of reasons. But I think that I'm glad this is the album that we covered. I do think maybe some of they have a couple of really strong songs on Parachute. Mona Lisa and Parachute itself are both excellent songs. Some of their best, but I think that this is probably their most consistent. And also, you're bringing up all these other jam bands and stuff, but I did remember that Paige McConnell, Fish's keyboardist, does play that theremin on All the Way Up to Heaven. So, yeah, I'm a big fan of this. It's a big thumbs up for me. This is kind of up my alley. So yeah, it's all good.
Yeah, it's kind of another era, right, of how music existed. And there's always going to be word of mouth and fan communities. But it's funny to think that the way they got a word of mouth kind of was something you could do from the late 60s all the way through like the mid 2000s. Even, in the MySpace era, there was that idea that MySpace was driving you to watch them live, right? Yeah. And now it seems almost anachronistic, the way they do things. And remembering the people who loved this band, a big piece of when you would talk to them, like they almost felt like they were a part of the band. They liked to buy the merch. They felt like they were integrated with them, which is how I think of a lot of these fan community, not just in jam bands and stuff, but even in like DIY punk, right? Or hardcore, underground hip hop, right? Even like house, like club scenes, right? All of those were built around the idea that you felt like you were one with the artist to some degree, like in the same wavelength, so to speak. But I would say this album represents an evolution in me as a person, guys, as I listened to this week. Okay. And here's what I'd say. If you had talked to me at the time that this album was contemporary in the late 90s, I would have focused on the things on this album that did not speak to me. I would have focused on... I'm not proud of what I would have called this, like, at the time, but I would not have used these exact words, but I would have focused on what I would have called something akin to, like, a beta energy to this a little bit. Like, they're, like, the edgeless sort of, like, hey, like, that sort of energy that came out of it. And I think that was something that, at that time in my life, late teens, early 20s, I was sort of rebelling against that idea. I was certainly not a toxic male, right? But I was certainly probably not as enlightened as I should be or open-minded on certain things. And that just read to me like, that is not the type of fan base that I myself. And so there was always a barrier in that. But even at the time, I would listen to the albums and I would never say I did not like this band, because there were things, especially in the power pop and jangly, and the slower ballads, right, that spoke to me musically a little bit. Even the hand drums, which a little bit goes a long way for me usually in music, did not bother me, because he really did do a good job of almost playing them like you recognize them as hand drums, but because of the cymbals and the crashing cymbals and stuff, it did seem a little bit more like traditional percussion, and the speed of them, and the rest of the song was crafted kind of like these genres like jangle pop and 70s power pop or sun-kissed pop of the Beach Boys type stuff, that were genres that I really liked. So I would always say, like, a lot of the songs lyrically I liked, and they didn't stay firmly ensconced in one type of music that became their brand, in the way that, Fish plays funk blues, funk sort of jam rock, and, Dave Matthews Band, like, has one sound, right, that they do. They speed it up and slow it up, but it's their sound. I appreciated that they were not as niche as that. Like, I appreciated that they kind of had a few more tricks up their sleeves. The lyrics to this, or the vocals to this day, are a little hard for me. I think that weird vocal tick that the main vocalist has, where he'll occasionally like go to like a breaking off tune type of thing, that I think is most noticeable in What You Wish For, where it's like, that's like a little bit of a like, that's
It
not a
goes up to
great sound.
Well, it goes from regular singing to falsetto.
Yeah, but it's not a clean falsetto. It's like there's a break, and that's where it's sort of more in that like Midwest emo lane, which is when they veer more into that sound a little bit, it becomes a less appealing sound for me. And so I would have defined before I listened to this week it more like I like the music of Guster. I don't like the singing of Guster, right? And the vibe maybe not for me. I think as I listen to this now a little bit more outside of, whatever space that was, I kind of came to appreciate the craft of what they're doing and the talent in terms of song construction. And you're right, Matt, there really isn't a bad song there isn't a song that I'm like, I would like to skip that because it just does not hit me. And even the songs that are not necessarily as much my taste, each of them have something in them that I appreciate. And there's just things that I like it more than I like, for example, Ben Folds 5, which is in the same lane. And I know one of you guys mentioned that, but certainly a counterpoint. I like them more than someone like Travis, like a band that was in the same era, because I feel like they have more tricks at their disposal. Like I might have liked some of Travis's songs more, but I feel like they have one trick, right? And I appreciate the fact that Guster has more tricks. Mm-hmm. And I think I've kind of come to appreciate, even if it's not my total vibe, the hustle, right? Of like doing it this way in like such a corporate era of music where you're just selling off everything. And the fact that these guys still had like a DIY sort of ethos. And even when they're selling off their music, they're selling it off in a lot of different interesting venues that don't necessarily represent the most profitable lanes for them. There's still a little bit of a humor to what they're doing and an authenticness to it that I think just, in doing that bio with them and listening to this album and saying, this is a very pleasant album. It really is. It's whereas before I might have connected on, there's not a lot of edge to this. I actually think I kind of came to appreciate that. I kind of came to appreciate the fact that maybe it was a little bit more of a compelling, well-made album than I gave it credit for. And it's one of the cool things about doing this podcast is I can attack stuff that maybe, I'd put in a box for a while and that was my take on it, and it transcended it. So, and I kind of came to realize it wasn't easy to say who this sounds like, because really at the end of the day, it does sound like Guster, right? Like what they do. That mix of like the genre shifting of pop music with sort of the through lines of a jam band, like Matt said, but with the hand percussion and like indie almost emo level lyrics and hooks, right? Like and when you put together the emo with the quirky, with the indie rock, with the jam band, that's the formula. But unlike some of those other bands that they just keep riding the formula into the ground, their formula is not one that gets formulaic. I know that sounds oxymoronic, but it allows for more versatility. And even like they do tricks where, they're adding a cleaner production here. And I'm not always a big fan of Lily White. Like I think his mixes are very clean, like spick and span clean at times, too much so. But in this case, because Guster sort of has that earnestness to it and the idea that their music is bright, his polish to it does not hurt it or take away from it as much as I think it could with other types of music that were still going for like a grittier feel. I don't think that Guster wants to be gritty or aims to be gritty, and it kind of won me over a little bit, like what they were going for. And whereas Ernest used to maybe irk me a little bit more, maybe I as I've gotten older and softer, I've come to appreciate like true earnesty, not fake earnestness. So there you go, a surprise thumbs up for me, I think, in terms of how I felt about this.
Right on. Yeah, it's funny. I was just thinking of another story. Like there is something about because I've always liked Guster, but I would not consider myself one of those people that you were describing earlier. That like I've seen them. I think I've seen them 3 times, right? Like, and it's not like. And if they came around here like tomorrow, it's not like I'd be like I have to see Guster. You know, there's very few bands I feel that way about now. But I do remember when I saw them in San Francisco. A buddy of mine was like who probably still is super into them. And they were in the back of that's like the thing. They were just hanging out in the back of the I think it was the Fillmore when we saw them there. Mm-hmm. And like he ran up to Ryan, it was Ryan Miller, and was like, Ryan, dude. And he started telling, remember when you came to this college and we hung out? Like he hung out with him afterwards for like 10 minutes. God. And he's like, I'm like, dude, stop doing that. This is not cool, you know. But he was very much, and I saw
there was a pick me kid energy to fans a little bit that was at the time
I felt so bad for the guy. He was, and to his credit, he was very nice and cordial and stuff like that. But I was like, dude, he doesn't remember. Right. Like, So but there's very much people are.
Are you Guster fan 71 at AOL.com?
Yeah,
it's a very like parasocial relationship.
It is. That's a good way to put it, Josh. Yeah, and some of that stuff sometimes, at the time, unnerved me a little bit, and maybe now I have fonder thoughts of it than I did at that time. So